Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning study. Before we begin, let's just have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful that we can be here again this morning, that we can open up your word, and that we can receive light and comfort and insight into the things in this world and into ourselves as we behold Christ and his work in the symbols of prophecy and biblical history. So we ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit that inspired the Bible can come to us and give us a clear understanding of the things that we are studying. We know that there's much that we don't understand, and so we just ask for your guidance. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so yesterday we began looking a little bit deeper into 2 Samuel chapter 13. And the first thing that we do often is we look at some of the symbols. This seems like a pretty obvious parallel on the surface. And just to kind of review to get our minds back on track here. So yesterday we had, let me see here. What's this doing? Okay. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so let's go back here and move this over so I can see that better. Okay, so we have these different characters. So we have Absalom's sister Tamar and Amnon, which is David's first son, the oldest son. And he's going to have this situation where he lusts after his sister Tamar. And then we're going to have Jonadab. He's the, am I doing this right? Let me see. Jonadab, he's the
Nephew.
nephew. That's it. I was trying to remember. He's the nephew, right? And he's going to make this suggestion to Amnon on how to get with Tamar. So what are these characters representing? So Amnon, what did we have him represent? Now we noticed his number 550 was connected with what? Moran, do you remember what you had done with 550? So it's the hexagonal number. That is, if you do it in base 6, 550 is 226. Is that correct? Is that what, or is that a hexadecimal? Yeah. So the hexadecimal is 226 as converted into 550, right?
Yeah.
Or is it the other way? Okay. Sometimes I get mixed up about that. Okay. So 550 equals 226. So that would be the number 226, which represents June 22nd, converts into 550, right? I always get mixed up. I'm still not quite sure. Or do I just put 550 into, let me see here. I'll do this. For some reason, my brain's not working. So if I put 550 in there, it's represented as the hexadecimal 226. So that is the hexadecimal number 226 is equal to base 10. So base 6. Now this isn't, hexadecimal, that's, what is that? That's
It
base
means there's
what?
16
16.
options
Okay.
for the character.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's what I was getting mixed up. So 16. Okay, that makes sense now, because it didn't make sense before. I was thinking of, I don't know what I was thinking of. Yeah, hexadecimal. So that's just 8. That's double of the octal, right? That's the idea. Like octal is base 8, hexadecimal is base 16. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so base 10 and base 16. Now, and we know that if we take July 18, 1 plus 8 plus 7 is 16. So that's part of the significance of 16. We also know 16 is connected with the cleansing of the temple by the priests and the Levites in Second Chronicles chapter 29. But yeah, so we have Amnon represents FFA. Now we already had that before we had the 226. So why does Amnon represent FFA? What is he doing?
Amnon was the firstborn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Firstborn son of 6 different women.
Yeah. So he's lusting after what? I mean, obviously Tamar, what does she represent? The purity of the message connected to, how did we understand Tamar?
Well, Tamar being the daughter of a foreign wife,
Mm-hmm.
being the purity of part of the message. Is this those that would come into the message without having a correct understanding of the foundations?
Well, no, because she's a virgin, and she also is connected to the story of Joseph with this coat of
Many
diverse
colors.
Yeah. So I think she would represent the pure message, the pure church, the pure part of the movement. So Amnon, his lust is to basically take from her something that isn't his, that he doesn't deserve. That's right. So this is the sort of self-seeking that we see in the movement, right? And it's going to
Well,
be done through deception.
there's other reasons, other biblical reasons why this was wrong as well.
Yeah.
First off, yes, he's seeking to sleep with his half sister,
Mm-hmm.
but in uncovering her nakedness, he's uncovering the nakedness of his father.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if I am reading things correctly, this situation with Amnon and Tamar is taking place after the affair with David and Bathsheba.
Yeah. And it's going to be that the sword will not depart from your house, right? So
Well,
this is the stuff that's going on within the family. This is the result of his sin. It manifests in these different conflicts.
isn't it also that David had pronounced sentence upon himself?
Yeah, yeah.
Because he made the comment that the man that did this will repay fourfold.
Mm-hmm.
So Amnon is going to be that part of the judgment of the fourfold.
Yeah.
But he's going to be the second of the sons to fall. Would you agree or disagree?
Which is the first?
The baby.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, okay. That's thinking about adult. Yeah. So first you have the child dies, and then you have this situation.
Right.
So this second.
So what Amnon is doing, he is disgracing himself, he's disgracing his father, and he is disgracing his half sister.
Mm-hmm. And now she would represent, though, the idea here is that this is this pure message that is defiled because of what happens within the movement.
So is the 2520 the pure message?
Well, yeah, that's definitely part of it, but it's not just the 2520, it's all the things that come from it. So the way that I would look at it is we had all of this light come to the movement from the study of the 2520, the 4-7 times, the understanding of Ezekiel and Revelation 9, even before we had July 18, right? The understanding of the 2300 days and the 70 weeks, the various chiasms that exist in Samuel Snow's letters and in 457. Like there was just this flood of light that came to the movement. Now, generally speaking, the movement isn't interested in any of this, the leadership especially. Now, why not? Like, why is there such a resistance to biblical chronology within the movement and to these things that are pretty profound? Now, Jeff is going to pick up on some of them, and there's going to be some individuals here and there who are interested, but the vast majority of the movement really isn't interested. We're going to have, the paper that I do on the 2520 is going to be attacked in 2015 by Mark Bruce and his followers. There's all this stuff going on, and yet some of it's going to be used, right, by FFA. And especially when we look at the situation. See, what I don't understand is I don't understand people's motives and what they're doing behind the scenes, because I don't have any way to read into people's minds. But the way that I perceive what happened is that people seem to be jockeying in position for themselves personally. That is, instead of looking at truth just as truth, they're looking at what advantage they can gain by different things. So, the person I know the best in that is Tabo. So Tabo is trying to put himself in a position of leadership within the movement. For some reason, people think that this will be a wonderful thing, to be in charge of stuff. I'm not sure why they think that would be desirable, but he definitely has this desire, right, to be in charge of things. And so what he looks at when he looks at something, from my perspective, it seemed, and he's kind of transparent guy, so he's easy to read. He's looking at what advantage it will be to him to be connected to some idea. So like initially when I did the stuff in 2014, dealing with the chronology, he actually gives me lots of time to present this at the camp meeting. But he doesn't watch any of it. He's not there. He's not interested in actually studying it. He just thinks it's something that he can use to his advantage. He does the same with the material from Africa. And he starts setting up this competition, or it's not like a competition, but he wants the African brethren to be lifted up in the movement, right? So blessings, he uses blessings material and starts promoting it. He doesn't really have any understanding of anything that he's doing, right? He's not spiritual. So he doesn't have that spiritual intelligence or insight. And, but everything's just, you understand what I'm saying? This is kind of what I see Amnon like. Tabo's just an example of it. But it's people who are looking at something for their own advantage, their own desires and lusts, with no true appreciation of Tamar for what Tamar represents. Does that make sense? I know I rambled on a bit there.
So to put it into secular terms, this Amnon is playing 4D chess. It's just a big chess game to him. He doesn't really care about spiritual things.
Yeah, well, definitely. He doesn't care about spiritual things, but we have to put it into the context of our movement, right? In the movement, there are people who are self-serving, right, within the leadership of FFA. Now, this is going to be like if we take the story and where do we place it, which it starts to become, the question is, are we placing this, I guess, initially before July 18th disappointment? Like, is the disappointment is this talking about that setup of July 18th? And then the disappointment is after, when he hates her more?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, right. Because that's what we kind of framed yesterday, is that we can go back and look at this in a line and do it that way. So is there any place that we can specifically put this, right? Because obviously the narrative of the story, we're going back, right? We're not taking this story and putting it, after, David's son dies, the first son. And we still have to figure out, where we are in a line and what we're zooming into. And when we zoom into a waymark, then we get a whole other line, and those in that line can overlap with the waymarks in the line above, right? So, at some point we're going to have to draw all of this out. But for now, we would look at this. This must be about July 18th. It's going back to before July 18th. The intent of FFA, or the leadership of FFA, or some within FFA, with their self-serving. And so this lust, right, it talks about basically that he fell sick, he was vexed, and he fell sick for his sister Tamar. That could describe the sort of attraction people have to the message, right? That is, many people who embrace the truth embrace it for the wrong reasons. Correct?
Correct.
Right. That is, they're not interested in the truth in the sense that what does truth do? What is the purpose of truth?
Convicts us of our sins.
Right. So, yeah, so there are people who accept things that are true, but for the wrong reason. That is, they're not interested in receiving conviction of sin and changing their lives. They think that they can use truth to their advantage. And that's one of the big problems our church has in its evangelistic series, is that, and especially in some countries, Adventism is presented to the baser part of human nature, self-seeking, self-serving, promotion within the community, social advantage in some countries. And so what kind of people do you get into the church? Well, people who want social advantage. They aren't interested in changing their lives. And that's true in North America as well. I mean, I went to an evangelistic series. Of course, it was the Black Church, but in Edmonton. One of them, the one on, the one Colin went to. But anyway, it was all about, prosperity, like investing. It was like an investing evangelistic series. Does that even make any sense?
Yeah.
Like about, like you're attracting the wrong type of people if it's about, prosperity, because that's not what the gospel is about. And so whatever bait you use, that's the type of fish you will catch. And so the church is infected by that, and the movement as well. So we have a lot of people join the movement because of sensationalism. There's a lot of jealousy towards the church. So a lot of Adventists who are part of personal ministry or independent ministries. The reason why they're interested in independent ministries is they have a bone to pick with the church, with how they were treated at some point. And really, they're just people who are jealous for power. That's kind of a simplification, but I see this happen all the time. And so they join a movement, and it's really about self-vindication. It's not about what the truth is. And so we saw that manifest in our movement. So I would think that that's what's being depicted here. Now, how do we connect this, though, with the punishment to David? So because David represents July 18th, but, this is happening after all of that. So how do we understand that? Is this just talking about the results of what happens in the movement after July 18th using these different stories, even though these lines go back before July 18th? Does that make sense?
Well, okay, the lines go back before July 18th, but in this situation, isn't the decision to place an event at July 18th the sin that we're having to deal with?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if David represents July 18th, his sin, though, represents the time setting connected with it, right?
Okay. The time setting, I think, is a secondary issue. It is the event, I think, is the bigger issue.
Okay. What do you mean, the event?
That Nashville will be destroyed on a given date.
Okay. So that we shouldn't have it. There was nothing wrong with having a date, but we just shouldn't have had an event.
Was there anything wrong with October 22nd, 1844?
No, because it's correct. It's a correct date. You could see
And
that there's the end of the prophetic periods, and you could mark the end of those prophetic periods, but you didn't need to attach an event to it.
Correct. And that was where the problem was in the Millerite time. That was where the problem is in our time, is that there was a specific event that was attached to this.
Yeah, see, when I go back to how time setting came into the movement, at least from my perspective. So we had back in 2015, so I think it was in December of 2014, that Jeff is going to go, I think he goes to Wales, or he goes to Germany or someplace. But anyway, he's going to come back from that talking about that we're going to be making a prediction regarding Islam. That time, Mark Bruce is still involved in everything. In 2015 at the camp meeting, and in 2015 is when I do my studies on Islam. I believe that's when I do my presentations about Islam at the camp meeting in Alberta, right? So Jeff is there. Mark Bruce had been there in 2014. He wasn't there in 2015. Jeff is going to be there, and I think Michael comes in 2015. But anyway, Jeff is talking about this prediction that we're going to be making some prediction regarding Islam. Now, we don't have it as a date, right? Like nobody's thinking we're going to predict a date that something's going to happen with Islam. So then in 2018, when the time setting comes in, all I'm doing is I'm dealing with all of the past prophetic periods. I have no interest in like setting a date. But Jeff introduces at the camp meeting in the summer in Alberta, 2018, that we're now going to be time setting. Now, I'm not really that happy about it, but, I'm not in charge of the movement. And so at that time, I present the Week of Christ study at that camp meeting. And then he ends up inviting us to Arkansas. I know this is kind of rambling, but there's this natural sort of progression of things that happen. So when Tess gives this November 9th, and then I take all of these things that I studied in the past and have this date, July 18, 2020. And then Stephen emails me and says, it's 252 days after November 9th. And then we end up with all of this stuff with the 525 to December 25th and the 30 years, and all of these different things come together. When I make the July 18 prediction, I'm saying that, what does this mean? Is this some kind of an attack? Because I go back to Jeff's original idea that we're going to be making a prediction about Islam, right? So the question is this telling us that Islam is going to attack the United States on July 18th? And that's picked up, right? So in a sense, I'm kind of responsible for that. At least I feel responsible, right? I should have maybe been a bit more cautious, but you get caught up in all of the stuff that's happening. Like, what does this mean? Even though I'm not like saying Islam's going to attack the United States. I mean, I might be saying that, but I'm just saying it as like a hypothetical because we don't know at that point. So where does the mistake come in? Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like,
okay,
we get this date, but we need to examine what it means.
All right.
But did we make some mistake in how we approach studying it? Is it because of all this infighting that it gets to the point where we make this solid prediction?
One of the premises that we have addressed multiple times is using a comparative for our time with Millerite history, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, our situation is one where if we are looking at Millerite history, let's say we're looking at the time frame of Millerite history from 1840 to April 19th, 1844. Where on the 1843 chart is a specific date revealed?
Well, there's no specific date on the 1843 chart.
My point.
Yeah. But they are being more specific, having, well, I guess they have the chronology. Do they have on the chart really specifically, like the chart is a bunch of calculations. It says at the end, the everlasting kingdom, 1843.
Correct. I agree. But
yeah,
there is nowhere on the 1843 chart that gives a specific date.
Right. Now, we had a specific date, but the date wasn't really the problem. The problem was how we approached understanding the date. And see, from my perspective, there was just so much infighting happening within the movement. Like, we didn't approach it properly because
It
people
wasn't
were
approached properly then either.
Yeah, well, that's true. But the question is, why wasn't it approached properly in our time? Like, what was going on? And I would say the main problem was self-seeking. That it wasn't a cooperative process. It was a adversarial process within the movement.
Wasn't it an adversarial process from 1840 to 1844 as well?
Well, how is it adversarial? They seemed a bit more united than we were.
If they were a bit more united than we were, why was it that the numbers within the movement had so many times where it swelled and then fell off, swelled and then fell off?
I don't think, yeah, so I don't think we really know a lot of that behind the scenes stuff. Like, we only have what's published, right? For the most part. We might have some private letters and so forth, but I don't know about a great deal of conflict within the movement in Millerite history. But maybe that's just not documented for us to see.
Wasn't there problems between Miller and Samuel Snow? Like they didn't agree on dates or something like that?
No, there's no. They didn't have any communication.
Okay.
Because Snow doesn't really show up until, like, being noticed until August, really. I mean, you could say maybe in July. Ellen White doesn't mention him at all. Even James White doesn't talk about Samuel Snow, by name, right? He talks about what happens at Exeter, but so Snow's not really a major player in the movement. But we can see that Snow is marginalized to some degree because he is writing letters to Southard that are being published in the Midnight Cry periodical. And so there are people that are following him, but he's still kind of a marginalized character in Adventist history. And it's not really till you get some of our later historians in the 1900s that really start talking about Snow as a person, right? So he never because what happens, I mean, shortly after, the movement's going to fall apart, right? So the focus wasn't really upon Snow, and he's going to go off into darkness personally, believing he's Elijah. So who's Samuel Snow in our history now?
It's a message, not a person.
Well, no. I know it's not a person, but when I say who, I don't mean as a person. I mean, who does he represent in our history? That is, what does he represent? Because it's not a positive thing, right? I mean, time setting's more associated with Samuel Snow than with William Miller, at least it should be.
So if Samuel Snow represents time setting, like Snow goes off into darkness, so this time setting is going to go way off the rails. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we have a division within our movement that must parallel Samuel Snow in the fanaticism of Snow. Right? People always want it to be Samuel Snow. But Samuel Snow's not really a positive character, Like, we think, he came up with the right date. But Snow has lots of wrong ideas. And there are people who want to take Snow's The True Midnight Cry and make it basically inspired, even when it contradicts Spirit of Prophecy.
Right.
Also, when we look at Snow's character, I don't think he's a good character, like, as far as his, he may have come up with the right date, but, he wants to believe he's Elijah. He's self-justifying. He has all kinds of conflicts. He misrepresents his own actions, things that he said that he gets accused of. He twists things around. He's manipulative. Like, he's not a positive character. So does Snow represent an aspect of the movement?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Which we've always argued that Snow is the movement, but he's not a good part of the movement, even though he has the right date. right? But he doesn't understand the significance of that date.
So he came to the right conclusion through the wrong means.
Well, he he had some of the truth, but not all of the truth,
No.
and his motives are not the best motives. Right? So what I like to imagine about Snow is he's a minor player who wants to be a major player, and that his motives are more self-interest than understanding the truth. Now, is that true of us? Think about all of the things that have happened in the movement since, you know, July 18th. Think about all of the crazy ideas that people are adopting. You got people who are flat earthers. You got people who believe uh, Turkey is the king of the north and that Turkey's going to attack Israel. You have the anti-Trinitarians, you know, major in the movement. What's all of the reasons that people get caught up in these false doctrines?
They're trying to hide their sins.
Yeah, and they want to be important, right? See, there's a problem with marginalization. Well, there's a problem with humanity, but people who are marginalized often take on strange ideas as a way of trying to see. Does anybody like being marginalized?
No.
Okay, well, that's not true.
Mm.
Most people don't. Why don't people like being marginalized? What is it about human nature that people want? Why do people want to be in leadership positions? What is it about our nature?
We have a social nature. We want to be included.
I would say power.
Okay.
Power.
See, I mean, I don't really fully understand it. I mean, I would think that we have a basic need to be loved and to love, right? When that is damaged in some way, people then seek, people want to be heroes. People want to be admired, which to me seems kind of fleeting, right? And people will even, you know, there's all these YouTube videos about, how to improve your social standing. A lot of the videos, some of the stuff that I watch is good, but like Diary of a CEO, if anybody's ever watched him, and Williams, whatever his name is, can't think of what his is, but and no, Andrew Williams. Anyway, um, there's always about like success and changing your social standing. Now, why does this matter to people? Like, because it is a problem, right? It is a part of our nature, but it's a perversion of nature, right?
If you follow the teachings of Dr. Jordan Peterson, it's because we have a natural tendency to admire people in a hierarchy, and people who are higher in the hierarchy are more admired than those who aren't. So that's why people want it.
But why do they want to be admired? That's the question. Like that would be part of our sinful nature, right?
Correct.
That's
Correct.
Satan's character, right? The self-exaltation and usurpation. Instead of sort of accepting who we are and and just having loving relationships with our family. People
Exactly.
want other people to acknowledge them, right? And that's one of the problems of power. Like people who become powerful generally, who seek positions in politics, they already have a wrong motive to begin with, right? Because they're not interested in anything except power and admiration and control over other people's lives, right? People who become police officers, people who become judges, they don't do that generally out of the goodness of their heart and thinking about others. It's about self, right? So we can't really expect that since their motives are bad, that the outcome of their decisions are not going to be good, right? As Pierre Elliott Trudeau said, how did he put it? Something about somebody who wants power badly is it's not a good thing. And then he was asked, how much do you want power? And he says, not badly, which of course he was lying. But you understand the point is that in this world, whether Jordan Peterson's right about hierarchies, I mean, hierarchies exist, but because they're a natural part of the fact that we're all different. But the problem is that people are desiring something that is not good. That is, it reflects Satan's character, right? So when you have Absalom who wants to be king, instead of his father, right? Is it because he really cares about Israel, about God? He just cares about himself, right? And Amnon doesn't really care about his sister. So in this movement, can we say that the vast majority of the movement, the leadership even, didn't care about the truth? Can we say that? Because they didn't show in any way that they acted that they were interested in the truth.
That's correct.
Yeah. Because that was the thing that puzzled me. Because I assumed, out of my naivety, that people would be interested in what was true. Because that's the question I always ask is something true? I don't care who advocated it, whether there's somebody I like or not, personally. The thing is something true? I don't care about the power structure, like who's in charge. It doesn't really matter. As long as what's being promoted is truth. But in this movement, that question wasn't really important to many people. It was, what can I do with this information? How will this information further my career, my social standing? And when you think about it, like, you have this sort of little group and people are caring about what position they have in a group. Now, one of it has to do with people's own ideas about themselves, that we often think more of ourselves than we ought. Right? So we think, well, I should be in charge because I know what's best. Right? That's a delusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we don't know anything. Like, the last thing I would want is to be in charge because I understand, what my limitations are. I have no sort of imaginings that I'm somehow the right guy to be making decisions. God is the one who should be in charge. He needs to be in charge of this movement. He needs to be in charge of our Bible studies. And each of us individually have to be connected to God for that to happen, right? There's nothing I can do by just joining a group that's following God. If I'm not following God, it won't benefit me, right? So some people try to get in on other people's coattails, right? So that's why some people join the movement. They don't mind being, just sitting there listening to studies, even if they don't really understand what's going on. They just think being part of a group is somehow going to save them if they can find the right group to be a part of, right? Do people agree with this idea? People join churches. They don't necessarily have to understand everything in their own mind. They're just with the right group of people.
Yeah.
What we have here is typified by lemmings. We have those
following the group. Yeah.
Okay. All they want to make sure is, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be. And they want to follow with what is being with whatever is going on. Whether or not they understand it isn't the point to them. They're part of a group.
Right. So people want to identify with the group. Now, some people want to be in charge of the group.
Right.
And those are the more dangerous ones.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Because, and we can see Parminder is a perfect example of that. I mean, he just manipulated people so that he could, I don't know what. I don't really understand the motive there. I mean, I guess he can get a lot of money without, doing any real work. That could be his motive. But maybe for some people, it's just praise. They just, I don't know. Maybe it's some kind of narcissistic need. If they call it narcissistic supply, that some people have to have other people admiring them. But I don't know. It's hard to understand what people's motives are. But you can see that if we were following Christ, we would have acted way different in the movement in regard to truth. It would not have been competitive in the way that it was.
Well, what's been going on in the movement is, in a sense, no different than what went on amongst the disciples prior to Christ and his ascension.
Yeah. So back in 2017, when we were studying Samuel Snow's letters, one of the main things that I saw in Samuel Snow's letters that I couldn't get people to even look at was these two Passovers, right? So you got the April 3rd Passover, which is the false Passover, and then the May 2nd Passover, which is the true Passover. And you have the disappointment in between, right? So you have the first day of the first month. Now Jeff had lined that up with 9/11, and I talked to him about the problem of it, because that has to be something in our history. So that became November 9th. November 9th became this dividing between these two classes. Now, so back then, as I'm looking at this Passover, well, we're going to have the disciples at the Passover. We're going to have Judas, right? Judas is going to betray Christ. And so we can say, well, Judas is the bad one, right? But aren't all of the disciples in the same boat?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what needed to happen, what the movement needed to recognize, is that, because we just wanted to be on the side of the true and not the false, like that's our profession, right? We want to be the wise versions, not the foolish versions. And so we have the separation of these classes. But the motives of the heart for everyone seems to be on the side of the false, right? So when Parminder's group splits, we have within the movement people mocking and exalting and saying, basically, we're so much better than Parminder, right? And yet the whole purpose was to humble them, not to exalt them, right? So then I thought, well, maybe July 18th is going to do that. It's gonna humble us so that we can recognize the problem that we have. But all it did is manifest the problem, right?
Right.
That a crisis doesn't develop character, it reveals character. And so the character of people has been revealed ever since July 18th of this movement. And the thing, that we see as we look at it is the question is, well, what is this movement even for? I mean, I do believe that God has a purpose in it, because it's pretty clear that we're connected somehow to these external events that are happening in the world today. This isn't just about us, this little group that meets and discusses these things, that it's a bit bigger than us, which is a bit overwhelming. So we have to believe that God is doing this with other people in other ways. But somehow this all fits into God's plan. And we need to recognize in these characters, in these stories, what is wrong with us. But it's to me, it's just, I'm sort of tempted to almost be in a desperate fit about it, if that makes sense. It's so sad, the condition that this movement is in. But there's nothing I can do about it except what I can do individually in my own life. And maybe that's the whole point.
Okay.
Yeah.
In looking at this, again, comparing it with the disciples, comparing it with Millerites.
Yeah, everything falls apart.
Okay, so after the ascension, what did the disciples do?
10 days, they're in the upper room praying and studying.
Okay, praying, studying, confessing their sins to one another.
Yeah. And we have to come to that at some point.
Okay. What happened after October 22nd, 1844?
Well, we have some people making the pretension of studying, but we have a small group that ends up studying James White's and Ellen White's group.
Right.
Yeah. And I believe that group represents our group, which is troubling. On a number of levels. One is, it just seems like, well, we're starting over from scratch, and they took a long time to develop into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. How is what we've done? How is it going to be connected with end time events? because we're nobody cares about us, like what we're saying, not us personally, but anything that we have to say. And how is that going to, with all of the myriad of voices that are in this world, how is that going to accomplish anything? So obviously God has to take control of it all, right?
Agreed.
And, so we have this human idea, like my own personal feelings, like I should be doing more than I am. But God keeps telling me, you're doing what I'm asking you to do. And that's frustrating because in a sense, it's kind of in a waiting pattern. It's like a tarrying time, right? That's what the disciples are doing in the upper room. Aren't they tarrying? Aren't they asked to tarry?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess that's what we're asked to do, and just wait to see what God's going to do with his power. But we see a lot of people caught up in all these winds of doctrine. I guess we're doing the right thing, even though it doesn't look like it's accomplishing anything.
Okay. The point is that are we not told that we are to gather up all of the light that has come?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Well, that's what we're doing. I mean, the thing is, we've been doing this for a long time. It kind of bothers me a bit, right? That things go on so long.
But if the situation,
I'm a patient guy, but sometimes sometimes I get a bit impatient.
if the situation with the disciples was looked at prophetically, how long were they in the upper room then?
10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that there's time that has to go by.
Now,
But it just seems to be getting worse and worse, though, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm just speaking from my own feelings here at this moment. So.
Okay, but are we to operate by feelings, or are we to operate by faith?
I never operate by feelings, but I still have them.
Really? You have feelings?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and I express them sometimes because, maybe other people can identify, with the feelings, but we know that we're not going by feelings here, right? We know that we can feel all of these things, but we have to see in this story hope that this is for a purpose, right? In all the different situations in my life, that are unpleasant, as I talk to God about things, he gives me hope, even when things don't seem to be going correctly.
Right.
And so that hope, I think, is extremely important in our connection with God. And that I think the mistake happens when people take things into their own hands and try to fulfill God's promises, thinking that they know better than God. That's what's happened in the movement. Like, we haven't had the humility and meekness to just allow God to teach us.
Right.
So that's what we need, right? We need to be taught of God. Even if we look at just this story on its sort of base level of Amnon, right? I mean, it's a pretty immature thing to be sort of lustful and lovesick, right? He's falling sick. He's in love with his sister Tamar. It's just a base human emotion. The idea that he thinks that having his sister is somehow going to satisfy that emotion, that somehow something good would come from it, is pretty immature and short-sighted.
Okay.
So David raised a pretty immature son. How old would Amnon be?
I would be placing Amnon possibly about 21, 22 years old.
Yeah. So he should know better.
Well, let's be blunt.
Okay.
If Amnon, as we're coming to understand this, Amnon was firstborn son.
Yeah.
Right? When David ruled in Hebron, right?
Yeah.
Now, these things, as we're looking at them, David, when he began to rule in Hebron, was 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, he's going to live to be 70.
Okay, but he reigned in Hebron 7.5 years.
Yeah.
if Amnon was his firstborn son and was born while he reigned in Hebron,
Mm-hmm.
David would have been 31 at the earliest.
Yeah.
Or about 31. And I think the case can be made that Amnon rapes Tamar after David's affair with Bathsheba.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty clear.
So if that's the case, Amnon would have been in the age range of between 19 and 21.
Yeah, so somewhere in there. Yeah.
Now, David's greatest fault was not as king, was not as a general, but was as a father.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a problem with that statement?
No. But what would that symbolically represent in our time then?
If symbolically, a father is just as responsible for the training of the children as is the mother.
Okay, now we have David representing Christ's leadership under July 18, 2020. So there's a transition from the first angel's message to the second angel, David being the second angel, where Christ takes over leadership. But these sons, that's problems that he's going to have in his family. First, the death of his son from the result of murder and adultery.
Well, how that made Tamar?
What was that, William?
How old would that make Tamar?
Potentially between 14 and 16.
Yeah, so teenager. Yeah. Well, especially the fact that she's a virgin. She's not married yet, so she would be a teenager probably, right?
I would agree.
Yeah, because they get married fairly young back in those days.
We came to understand the situation with Jacob and his sons, and we know that within 7 years that Jacob had how many?
How many sons?
Yeah.
Well, he had 11 sons and one daughter that we know of.
Correct. Within a 7-year period.
Yeah.
So here's David. So it's entirely possible that, he's got in this 7-year period in Hebron, we have it outlined that he had 6 sons and likely 1 daughter.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that David did nothing after his affair with Bathsheba that for me is the most disconcerting point.
What do you mean did nothing?
He should have punished Amnon immediately.
Oh, yeah. So in this story, he doesn't do any punishment.
He didn't do anything to punish Amnon. He didn't do anything to punish Absalom.
Mm-hmm.
And when we recognize the point that this went on for a period of 2 years.
Now, is it because he's sort of accepting this as a result of his sin, though, that he's not punishing?
I believe we could read that this was that he found himself powerless
because of his sin?
Because of his sin.
Yeah.
So is it possible that David's failure as a father is symbolically the mishandling of truth in our message?
I would have to think so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting as we continue through this, but there's a lot to come up in the chapters we have looked at, and then in the chapters we have yet to look at. And I've been looking at this and comparing it with what Stephen put together in tabled history, and there's just certain things that I think we could establish as we are zooming into part of our own line as to what points we're going to be able to see.
Yeah. Okay. So David, in this context, trying to relate it to our movement, it's basically because the failure of the prediction that there is these problems that occur within the movement. Now, David, of course, is not FFA, right? But FFA does pick up and use David, right? Just because Saul did, right? He's going to be taking David and making him in charge of the army and all that type of stuff, right? So when we went back in the story of Saul and David, that conflict. So that conflict with David and Saul, it still shows that David was used. But David here, this is his own sin. So we're saying the sin then, the sin with Bathsheba is what specifically? Is it just time setting, or because David doesn't have that characteristic we see in FFA of trying to exalt himself. Okay. So we can see that Amnon wants Tamar to make these cakes, right? So this has to do with providing information, biblical information and study. So we're taking this back before July 18th. So one of David's sons is symbolizing a characteristic in the movement that existed before July 18th. And that is the lust, the self-seeking, and this mishandling of the truth of the message, which is then going to cause a repulsion to the message, to the very things that they profess to believe in, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. Then in verse 20, and Absalom her brother said unto her, Hath Amnon thy brother been with thee? But hold now thy peace, my sister, he is thy brother. Regard not this thing. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother's Absalom's house. So who is Absalom here? What is he representing? Because Absalom is not going to want to make a big fuss about this either, right? So David isn't just not punishing him. Even Tamar's brother, Absalom, he's not wanting to cause a fuss about what happened, even though Tamar is going to remain desolate in her brother Absalom's house, whatever that means as far as we apply it to this movement. It's just she's not going to get married, right? Now David's going to hear about these things and he's going to be angry. But Absalom spake unto his brother Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. So what does it mean that Amnon didn't speak neither good nor bad? I mean, that's probably an idiomatic expression.
Would you repeat that, please?
Okay, so Absalom is not going to speak to his brother Amnon neither good nor bad. Even though Absalom hated Amnon, it says because Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. But Absalom's not going to make a fuss. He doesn't want Tamar to make a fuss about what happened. David's still going to hear about it. He's going to be angry. Absalom's not going to talk to Amnon. But it says neither good nor bad. And I just wonder that if there's some symbolism in that. But who exactly is Absalom, or what is Absalom representing? Now, Absalom's going to murder Amnon, so as you see there in the headline. So, there's a lot of bad things going on here. And this is going to it came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. So this is another story that we're going to look into, which would help us understand who Absalom is.
Okay, but Baal Hazor, you look at the number of the name of that town, and you've got July 18th.
Yeah, so it has the digits of July 18th in it. Yeah, with one extra one, but it's got the digits of July 18th.
Okay, but this is Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim.
Yeah, Lord of the village. Chetzor means village. Baal is Lord.
So is Absalom having sheep shears in the Lord of the village or the Lord of the movement, which is beside Ephraim, which means beside Israel? Because Ephraim is used multiple times to denote Israel, right?
Ephraim, is also Joseph. Yeah, but so Ephraim is sometimes called Joseph. right? But Ephraim refers to northern Israel,
Right.
It's the biggest of the tribes in northern Israel, yeah. But the question here, because before we get into all this part of the story, which we can do tomorrow, maybe we could look at it today. But in this story about Absalom, so when he speaks neither good nor bad, the thing that I wanted to understand is, what does that idiom mean?
I would think he's being duplicitous.
Right. So he's hiding his intentions, right? Is that
Well, okay. And I know that this is an odd place to make this comment, but there are situations, let's say, that, all right, within science fiction, there's a comment that's made that revenge is a dish best served cold.
okay?
When you consider something like that, basically revenge is a situation best done when the others don't expect it.
Okay. Well, I'm not following really what you're getting at. So you're just saying that he's going to have revenge, but he would just have to hide the fact that he wants revenge.
Correct.
So even the thing about don't make a fuss about it to Tamar, he's planning his revenge instead of going through the proper channels.
Well, he's planning revenge that isn't his to take.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What would be the process of revenge? How would you deal with the situation? What should have been done in that situation? He should have been killed. Amnon should have been killed, but it's not likely David's going to do that.
If I was going to, do that, which I'm not, but if I was going to do it, I'd just be nice to him and do everything I could for him so he wouldn't suspect it.
Well,
I mean, I'm just thinking on the human aspect.
But he's going to do neither good nor bad. He's just going to pretend it didn't happen. It's not going to, right? So he's not going to oppose him publicly and try to shame him or anything like that. He's just going to plan his revenge, right?
well, there is that. But see, here's the thing. While Absalom has accepted the role as being the defender of his sister,
Okay.
it was not his role to place judgment upon Amnon. Now, normally, under the law that was given to Moses, if a woman is raped, the rapist has the choice of marrying the woman.
But he couldn't do that with his sister, his half sister.
Or he is to be put to death.
Yeah. Okay. So we got Amnon representing FFA. So we have Absalom representing what?
Factions.
Just the factions that exist.
That's what I would have to think.
Okay. What factions? Like all the factions?
What about the factions that are seeking to be heard, seeking, some of leadership? I mean, we've addressed this in the past where there were those that when they began to cast people out, believed that they should be the ones in charge.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. So, because we don't understand what everybody's doing, what all everybody's motives are, as I said. So we have all kinds of people attached to the movement still in various ways, right? And there's lots of different factions of FFA, right? It's become extremely fractious, right? It's all fractured into these different groups. Now you have, the Canadian and American group were working together. Jeff comes along. He basically cuts out the Canadian group, right? He's got friends in the American group. We don't know how much the friends in the American group are feeding information to Jeff that's false, right? It seems like a lot of Jeff's reactions are disproportionate to any reality and sort of paranoid, right?
Okay.
About things that are happening. So I don't know, and we say, well, Amnon represents FFA, but you know, maybe Jeff isn't in this story right now, in this illustration. It's just it's before Jeff comes back or something. I don't know. But
What
then
is-
we're going to have Absalom murdering Amnon. So if Amnon represents FFA, is it that somehow FFA gets destroyed ultimately by Absalom, whatever Absalom represents these factions? William, you said something? Or Dwight?
It was me.
Okay, Dwight.
If David is FFA,
David's not FFA.
I'm asking to make sure that I'm understanding points right now.
Okay.
Because David was angry with what Amnon had done, but had done nothing about it. Jeff seemed to be angry about the outcome of July 18th, but he removed himself and stated that he was like the leper outside the camp.
Okay, so you're saying like, well, making Jeff and David being connected, we haven't done that before.
Right.
You've had this characteristic about David that he was a bad father. So, I mean, David represents July 18th and Christ's leadership, and that's how we've had it, because it's a transfer from Jeff, the leadership from FFA to Christ, right?
Right.
But then we have this problem with David, right? He's going to have, the sin with Bathsheba and murdering Uriah. And then he's going to have these problems within his family. So I'm not really sure how to sort out all of these different lines. I mean, when we look at a different line, different symbols can have more than one meaning. I would still say that, this represents July 18th, a failure of July 18th because of what was connected to it. And that this is being illustrated with Amnon and his self-seeking, his lust. And we're going to see with Absalom the same type of thing, but just in a different way. So we have one seeking, his relationship with his sister. The other one is going to seek to become king. So, yeah, I don't really know how to sort that out.
Can I put in my 2 cents on Amnon?
Yeah.
Bring your tuppence, brother.
Is it possible that Amnon is like he talks about Absalom, neither good nor bad? Is it possible that he is Christ as peacemaker, and ultimately Christ will get the revenge?
No,
No,
I don't
okay.
think so. I mean, it does mean father of peace, right?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, or peaceable father. But I don't think he's acting in that way.
Because revenge ultimately belongs to Christ.
Yeah.
We had FFA as Saul, right? King Saul. Saul.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in his story, is he still King Saul?
I don't know what you mean. Who's King Saul?
You said FFA was King Saul, right?
Well, but that's a different story. Saul's not in this story. Saul's been dead for a long time. So we have Amnon representing FFA.
Right, but Jeff's the leader of FFA, right?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Right, because we're going after July 18th. This is dealing with FFA after July 18th.
Okay.
Okay, so it says it came to pass after 2 full years. 2 full years after December 25th, 2021 is December 25th, 2023, right?
Right.
And that's 8,141 days from 9/11.
Okay.
So if we count from 9/11, an inclusive count, 8,141 days, we come to 2 full years after December 25th, 2021. Now, Jeff isn't going to speak until December 30th, 2023, right? So December 25th, 2023 is 2 full years after December 25th, 2021, and that's 8,141 inclusive days after 9/11.
Okay.
So does this point to that period of time that when we're going to have these sheep shears in Baal Hazor, that's when the death of Amnon occurs.
Okay.
Right? That is, when Jeff comes back, is that destroying Amnon? That is Amnon representing FFA when Jeff isn't in charge.
Right. I think that's logical.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. Yeah. So it's.
I think we
Yeah.
have a lot. I think we have a lot more to address with this in depth,
Mhm.
and it might be a good idea for us to cover this in full tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll do that tomorrow. Okay. So let's close with prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, thank you again. We ask, Lord, that as we study these things, we can see in ourselves our sin, the things that need to change. We know, Lord, that we have not walked perfect before you, and we just ask for forgiveness. We pray that you can do a work upon us that can have an effect upon those around us. And we ask that you can bring us together again to study these things regarding our history as we look in the past. So bless each person and bring us together again to study according to thy will. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.